Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law. I hope you're having a good day. And this channel name becomes more and more appropriate with every passing day since we truly are moving to the more uncivil side of the law. And we're going to be discussing one aspect of that right now with Donald Trump deploying the United States military into DC. Now, exactly what the nature of this deployment is a little unclear. What the military has been ordered to do, but military equipment has been seen not only in DC but also other cities in the United States getting ready, prepped, deployed, and it apparently is on the streets in DC as we speak right now, which makes me feel more and more good with every passing moment that I don't live there anymore. But they are there to do something. What are they there to do remains a little bit unclear. So we're going to try to analyze a couple different legal questions that could be being implicated by this. So we are making a couple different assumptions. One, that these are truly active duty military as opposed to National Guard, because there's a big difference. If it's National Guard, the National Guard can do police actions. They are under the authority of the governors unless they're called to active military service. So they are federal officials, but they're under the control of the state governors. So the National Guard, in your normal default configuration, their commander-in-chief in your normal default configuration is the governor of the respective state to which they come from. So they have many different commanders-in-chief for their respective territories. The governors can call on them unless they're being used by, the United States military for services either here or in the overseas. And National Guard sometimes gets deployed overseas. Now, if they're being used within the structures of the United States Army, then they're considered to be within the structures of the United States Army for all purposes and become just the same as troops. But in your normal everyday configuration, they are, although federal officials, they are under the authority of the respective governors who are the commanders in chief for the respective states. So we are going to make the assumption that this is not National Guard. I'm not sure how that would apply to DC in any case because they're not a state. Who would be the governor if there isn't one? So I'm going to assume that this is not national. This is not under the authority of some state governor because that doesn't even begin to make sense. And I don't know the law well enough in DC to think that maybe the president gets some authority to act as like a quasi governor for DC because it's a federal district. Maybe, but I'm interested in the broader implications as this gets nationwide. Can active duty military get involved in police actions within the relative states? If this goes to Minnesota or Los Angeles or anywhere else. So once we're outside of the federal enclave, assuming we're not in a territory, because again, different rules apply, right? So if we're in Puerto Rico, we ask different questions. If we're in Guam, we ask different questions. If we're in DC, we ask different questions. If we're overseas, we ask different questions. We're going to assume now we're going to be inside a state. Those are the questions I'm going to attempt to ask for you today. So I'm using this as a harbinger of things to come. We are assuming that Trump is going to try to deploy active duty military into states for the purposes of police action, which would be, for example, which are non-military actions. So police actions are not military actions and vice versa. So by police actions, we mean, for example, enforcing standard law enforcement, arresting people for standard law things, putting people in cuffs for just random normal law. Can you do that? Can you deploy the military to a state or a locality and have them enforce police actions? Well, let's look at the relevant legal questions. This is always fun, and I came prepared today to answer these questions. We start with everyone's favorite law, the Posse Comitatus Act. The Posse Comitatus Act, which is codified at 18 U.S.C. 1385, use of Army and Air Force as Posse Comitatus, which states that whoever, except in cases and under circumstances expressly authorized by the Constitution or acts of Congress, willfully uses any part of the Army or the Air Force as a Posse Comitatus, which incidentally is where the phrase posse comes from. If you ever wanted to know what a posse is, it comes from this phrase, Posse Comitatus, or otherwise to execute the laws, that is to enforce the laws, that's to engage in police actions, executing the law, right, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned or both. All right. So this is the one that you all know and love, the Posse Comitatus Act. Now, it says a couple things that you should immediately take note of. First of all, it says willfully uses any part of the Army or the Air Force. What does that not say? It does not say Navy, Marines, Coast Guard or Space Force now that exists. Now, the Marines and the Navy have, as part of their internal regulations, but not as part of statute, similar things that prevent them from doing it. But perhaps the Trump president could override those because they're internal regulations, not law. And the president can override a regulation. So who knows whether or not those apply. The Coast Guard does do domestic law enforcement. They do, especially when it comes to drug seizures. So that's number one, that it only applies to the Army and Air Force. And here's the big one that everyone misses when they read it. The big one is it says, except in cases and under circumstances expressly authorized by the Constitution or Act of Congress. So the Posse Comitatus law simply says you can't use the Army or Air Force to execute the laws, which is to say engage in police actions, except as authorized by the Constitution or an Act of Congress. So if you can find an authorization somewhere else, then you're not violating the Posse Comitatus Act, because that would be a thing by the Constitution or an Act of Congress. So can we find authority somewhere else to deploy the army for the sake of law enforcement? Because we can't use this, but if we have some authority somewhere else, then we're in the exception, right? We would have an exception. So let's see, can we find authority? Well, I've got two for you. First, it says except as authorized by the Constitution of the United States. So this is the clause that you want to say, why is this authorized? Well, this is Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution. And Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution says, the United States shall guarantee to every state in the Union a republican form of government, and shall protect each of them against invasion, and upon the application of the legislature or of the executive when the legislature cannot be convened, against domestic violence. And of course, the phrase here, domestic violence, does not mean its more modern meaning of disruption within a household. It means domestic in the sense of within the United States. In other words, civil unrest. So upon the application, so if they're invaded, which obviously isn't what's happening, he can do that. And if the legislature of the state or if the executive within the state asks, he can do it. So if a governor out there asks the president of the United States to send the military to help with a domestic violence insurrection, then he can do it, because Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution says the president can. That's how you get there. So if you have a governor that asks, will you send the military? The president can say yes, because Article 4, Section 4 says I can. So there's your authority from the United States Constitution. Well, the Posse Comitatus Act also said, well, not just the Constitution, but also acts of Congress. So can we find an act of Congress that would give us the authority to deploy the military? Yes, we can. No problem. I got you one. Title 10, United States Code, Section 253, Interference with State and Federal Law. The president, by use of the militia or the armed forces or both, and the militia in this context would be what we would now consider to be the National Guard. So by use of the National Guard or the armed forces or both, or by any other means, shall take such measures as he considers necessary to suppress in any state any insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination, or conspiracy if it so hinders the execution of laws in that state and of the United States within that state that any part or class of its people is deprived of a right, privilege, immunity, or protection named in the Constitution and secured by law, and by the constituted authorities of the state are unable, fail, or refuse to protect that right, privilege, or immunity, or give that protection, or opposes or obstructs the execution of the laws of the United States or impedes the course of justice under those laws. In any situation covered by Clause 1, the state shall be considered to deny equal protection of the law secured by the Constitution. So here, Article 10, Title 10 of the United States Code 253 says the president can, by use of the military, which is to say the National Guard, or the armed forces, or both, or anything else that he has at his disposal, can take measures he deems necessary in any state to end any insurrection, domestic violence, or unlawful combination or conspiracy, as long as some other things that happen, and as long as the state authority is unable to do it or unwilling or blah, blah, blah. So yes, long story short, the President of the United States can, in fact, if he is so inclined, deploy the military into a state for the purposes active army. He can, in fact, deploy the army into a state for the purposes of ending an ongoing insurrection or domestic violence, which again means civil unrest in this context. And he can have them engage in police actions for that purpose in order to restore a Republican form of government. Well, what is a Republican form of government? What it definitely is not is riots happening in the streets, whatever else it might be. So there you go. The President of the United States can, in fact, order the army to do this. And I think you can get there under some of the stuff. Now, this incidentally is the authority, as I understand it, in which school integrations were done. So this was the authority in which the president at the time used the army. First of all, he did a night trick because the National Guard, which remember is typically under state authority unless it's not. So the National Guard of Alabama was, preventing the schools from being integrated because they were under the authority of the state governor because they're the commander in chief, unless they're not. And then the president said, okay, now you're not. And so now their commander in chief is the president of the United States. And so they just, don't help. And this is also a clause that allows them to act to integrate the schools. So there you go. Yeah, since DC is a state, doesn't that hold true for DC? Yeah. But where's the definition of state in this code? Because I think state might be defined to include DC. Well, it includes Guam and Virgin Islands, so I got that going for you. So the term state at least includes Guam and Virgin Islands, but not North Marianas Islands. So if there's an insurrection in the North Marianas Islands, you're on your own. But if it's in Guam and the Virgin Islands, apparently that's a state for the purposes of this law. Okay. But not DC. Sometimes they include DC within a state's definition. There might be other authority within DC because DC is a federal district. And so there might be other authority within DC that I haven't yet found. But I'm assuming that there's something parallel for DC because it's a federal district and a federal enclave. Just trying to figure out if, things are happening outside. So, yeah. Yeah. How would that play on tribal land? It shouldn't be a problem because, I'm not an expert on tribal land, but the tribal land is typically considered a federal protectorate. So you would either be treating it as though it were DC, or but it's still within the bounds of a state, because the jurisdictional issues on tribal land gets weird. They're not totally sovereign, but they have some authority. It gets weird. It gets very, very weird within tribal land. But I assume that it's within the state enough that you can do that. So I don't think tribal land will get you where you want to be. Why hasn't everyone hit the like button yet? I do not know. Yeah, so that's where you can go. Could this apply to ICE? ICE is just normal police for the purposes of normal law. They're just police. They have a special jurisdiction, a special mandate. But ICE are police. They're federal police. They're federal police with a special jurisdiction. But then again, pretty much all the federal police have special jurisdictions. They have authority over some stuff. So ICE are just federal police. They're federal police with a narrower mandate, but they're police. $1.99 from Jim Stilata. Is the fentanyl intoxication going to be an issue? I don't think so. Not as far as I can tell. In terms of the Michigan death thing, this issue, no, not that I can tell. Unless they can show it would have to be that he was acting in such a way that in terms of justification of force. So you can't back end the justification like that. It would have to be what you knew at the time. Now, if the guy was behaving like if he was on PCP, which would be your typical, right? PCP people on PCP do some really weird crap. But if he had been like on PCP and he had been acting in a way like people on PCP do, then, and you found out later, oh, he had PCP, the fact that he was acting consistent with that manner would give you the justification. You can't back end the medical diagnosis into the rationale. It can justify what you saw was true. So he was acting in these ways. That was what gave me a justification. Well, why was he doing that? Oh, it turns out he was on PCP. So, but I didn't act based on that. I was basing what he did. And then I back end validated rather than back end justified it. So unless you can show that he was behaving in a way that was being amplified by a drug that would give you some ability to use excessive force that you wouldn't otherwise have, I don't see how the diagnosis helps you. Martial law is technically different than this. Technically, this isn't martial law. It's different than martial law a little bit. Martial law is a little bit different. Martial law only exists. Martial law is even a more extreme step, because in this circumstance, as I understand it, and I'm not an expert, and maybe this is more of a distinction without a difference, depends on your point of view, but you can do this without being martial law, because we've done this more often than we've done martial law, and we have done martial law in the United States at various points in various places, at various times. But in a martial law system, like, you basically, the civilian authority doesn't exist. So here, the whole point is to restore things to the civilian authority. So I don't think it's quite the same as martial law. Also, under ex parte Milligan, you can't have martial law as long as the courts are able to still meet. Now, query whether or not that's necessarily true or not, depending on the nature of the insurrection or that's ongoing, whether or not the courts can meet. But you can't have a martial law unless you have a suspension of the court's ability to meet under ex parte Milligan. So I don't know that you're quite there. The president's ability to use this, it doesn't necessarily implicate the courts aren't able to meet. So you might be able to do both at the same time. So I don't think it's quite martial law. I'm not sure how much that would necessarily matter to you if it's the army who is coming at your door and knocking on your door for stuff, whether or not it's technically martial law or not, but there's probably a distinction somewhere in there. Fentanyl stops you from breathing. Yeah, I don't think that matters. I don't think it matters, because as I've said before, you take the victim as you find them. So assuming that the police, what they did is a proximate cause of his death, then what ultimately caused his death seems irrelevant legally, because you take the victim as you find them. So if you can show that if you can show, because maybe it's not the cause in fact. So maybe it's not the cause in fact that the knee on the neck for 8 minutes is what killed him. Maybe it was the fentanyl did. So maybe you can get past cause and fact, but unless you can also show it's not proximate cause, you're going to have a really bad time, because you were the one that was creating the situation. So cause and fact would be one step, right? It was what did it. Proximate cause, we're looking for some length, and there is some length where it's too much, but not here, right? So there is a limit in the ether of how deep proximate cause can go, but not here. Here you're basically talking about 2 steps instead of 1. Yeah, it wasn't your neck. It wasn't the knee on the neck that killed you. It was your knee on the neck that caused the thing that you already had, the fentanyl, to cause you to stop breathing. So you're 2 steps instead of 1 step, but you're there. So I don't think it matters, and you take the victim as you find them. Assuming you have the underlying bad thing, you take the victim as you find them. So assuming putting your knee on a guy's neck for 8 minutes is bad and illegal, which is also incidentally why I was saying, well, maybe if you can show that he was acting in a completely uncontrolled way, and so therefore it was a justified use of force. That was my first idea. So maybe it was okay. Maybe we can get to justification. So, but if you can't get there, then the fact that he died as a result of a weakened condition, even if that was self-inflicted, is irrelevant. Yeah. So yeah, actual cause and proximate cause. The easiest way to think about that is just steps of attenuation. The actual cause is the thing that happens in a series of dominoes. I push over the chair, it falls. What caused the chair to fall over? Me pushing it over. That's the actual cause. Like, proximate cause would be, your Rube Goldberg machine. I did a thing that did a thing that did a thing that caused the chair to fall. And there's some amount there that becomes too much. So you are the but-for cause, because without you doing it, that wouldn't have happened. But you're not the actual cause. So the actual cause would be the thing that caused it to happen. You were a but-for cause, because but for you doing it wouldn't have happened. But there is a limit somewhere on how attenuated you can be before you have responsibility. And that limit is a little bit nebulous, but I guarantee you it's not 2 steps. $5 from Chris Conlon. Thank you. Fentanyl can depress respiration. Onset depends on route of delivery. Could have been onset that morning. It would have been bad timing, to say the least. Yes, that's true. But again, you take the victim as you find them. So unless unless what the police did is not the proximate cause. So if you can show essentially that what the police did had nothing to do with the fact he died, then you're fine. That'd be great. So if you can show medically that like he was if if he would have died exactly at that moment anyway, no matter what the police did, then you're probably in the clear. Yeah. So if he would have died exactly when he did, no matter what the police did, then you're probably in the clear, because then they're totally irresponsible. But if he died 5 seconds before he should have, as a result of what the police did, then they're on the hook. You know, that's your typical rule. If you are dying and I shoot you as you are dying, even if you would die 5 seconds later, I'm still guilty of murder. Those 5 seconds were yours and not mine. So yes, the fact that you would have died 5 seconds later is irrelevant. If the bullet hits your heart at the exact same moment you would have died anyway, then sure, I'm probably not guilty of murder, but I'm still guilty of attempted murder. But we've already had that discussion. Actual cause and cause and fact are the same thing. Different places cause a different thing. Yes, actual cause and fact are the same thing. I was talking about but for cause. So in but for cause, you're looking at it would, well, I might mix my terms depending on what I was saying to when. But yes, actual cause and cause and fact are the same. The but for cause is the thing that started this sequence down the road. And as every law student knows, we all say the one word, Paul's graph. Paul's graph. If that doesn't mean anything to you, don't worry about it. It's an inside law joke at this point. Yeah. Well, if you're guilty, no. If you're guilty, no. Again, if you again, depends what you knew and when you know it. If you shoot a corpse 5 seconds after they die, but you don't know it, then you're still guilty of attempted murder, because that's what you set out to do. Hell, if you shoot a person a day after they die, or a week after they die. First of all, I'm not sure a week after they die how you're not noticing that they're dead. But assuming that somehow manages to escape your attention, assuming it somehow managed to escape your attention that you're shooting a person who's been dead for a week, and you shoot a person attempting to kill them, you're still guilty of attempted murder, even a week later, because somehow you failed to notice they're dead. Your intent was to commit murder, so you're still guilty of attempted murder, even a week after they died, because that was what you set out to do. So, good times. Yeah, so swatting someone and discovering the body. Well, unless the SWAT team tries to shoot the body, but that'd be fun, or not fun. That'd be legally complicated. But yeah, that'd be interesting. You try to SWAT a guy, and the SWAT team shows up a week after they're already dead, and the SWAT team, not noticing the person is dead, then shoots them. Can you get the first guy for murder? Yeah, probably, or attempted murder at least. Yeah, you could probably do that if you really want to be. Yeah, because you said it's a sequence together. Yeah, you can do it. Actually, you could probably even get there before the police kick down the door, technically speaking, because to have attempted murder, or attempted anything for that matter, you don't need like that last step necessarily. You just need a sufficient step along the line. Now, where that is, again, legally can get a little bit complicated, and this is one of the things where lawyers really don't want you to find out. We'd really prefer that you not find out exactly where the line is. We want you to stay well away. So I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about, and we'll make this a little bit easier, and we'll talk about burglary. All right, so we'll make it a burglary instead of a murder to illustrate some of the problems that emerge. All right, so your goal is to commit a burglary. All right, so your goal is to commit a burglary, and you go to a particular property, and you put up your ladder that you brought with you, and you are about to break the window, and for some reason you decide not to do it. Maybe you see someone, or maybe you hear a sound and you decide, I'm not going to. Are you guilty of attempted burglary? The answer is yes. Why? Well, I just told you. The answer was to set you. We know, as a matter of fact, because I just told you in the hypothetical, we know as a matter of fact that the person who's trying to do this is trying to do a burglary. and the person came to the house with their ladder and their hammer with the idea of breaking into the window. And they decided at the last minute not to do that. But they've already made a substantial step along the way. So even though they never entered the house and even though they never broke the window, so in this, going back to the murder example, even though they never shot the gun, for example, we're still there. We're still guilty on attempt. Now, here's the problem, and here's where lawyers don't want to answer questions. How far back can we go and still get to attempt? When does the attempt actually start versus just merely planning and preparation? This is a good one, and I saw this recently dealing with a potential high school person who might be committing a particular acts of violence that might be notable, and they found documentation of his plan to do this, and the prosecutors were charging him with attempted murder times whatever, I don't know, 30 or whatever the goal was, because it was in the documentation. And so I don't know how it ended, because I think the article was written very early in the process, but it became a bit of a philosophical debate. How early is early enough to get you for attempt? Because I don't even know if he necessarily had the guns at that point. That's how early it was, but he had a plan and names and all the rest, and is that early enough for attempt? Philosophical. But yeah, going back to the robbery example, you didn't actually put up the ladder. As you were getting to the house, you heard a noise. Can I charge you with attempt? Okay, you brought your ladder by a car. You didn't actually get out of your car. You just drove to the house and then you changed your mind. All right, how about when you loaded up the ladder? How about when you bought the ladder? And so forth and so on. How far back in time can I go and still get you for attempt? Good question. I don't know, and I don't want you to find out. So don't do any of these things, and we won't have to have this discussion. But yeah, I did see it come up in the case of a potential mass violence doer for a high school, where they found documentation and arrested him and charged him with attempted murder times whatever. And I don't even know if he had firearms, and it became a bit of a debate about whether or not you can charge him with attempt. This would be the kind of thing that I, as a lawyer, don't want to figure out the answer to. Yeah, this is good times. You have to keep up with me, Matt, as I'm just changing from things to things. Just pay attention to what we're talking about. Do you have any updates for that high school drama class you're talking about? Not as far as I'm aware, no, but I did see they posted a video from their school district today congratulating their seniors, and I thought about reposting it. Conspiracy and attempt are completely different things. They're completely different crimes and can be charged separately. Now, attempt merges in to the actual crime, but conspiracy doesn't. So what do I mean by merger? Well, once you do the thing, it's no longer attempt. So it's only attempt up until the point you do the thing. So attempt merges. So once you do the thing, you can't be charged with attempt anymore because you did the thing. So attempt merges. It becomes part of the principal crime, but conspiracy doesn't, because conspiracy is a different crime. Conspiracy, as Matt will remember, because he corrected me recently on this, thank you, Matt. Matt will remember a conspiracy requires an agreement between two or more people and at least one acts towards that thing, whereas attempt does not require two or more people. So they're completely different because they have different elements. So conspiracy is two or more people in common agreement with one overt act. An attempt is some number of people, which may be one, with an overt act. So there you go. Yeah, conspiracy you can be charged with both conspiracy and the crime. And that occasionally happens, especially if the police are trying to. It's a nice little trick that the police have, and different jurisdictions deal with it differently. But it's a nice little trick that they have sometimes if they charge you with the main crime and they don't convict you. So you didn't do the main crime. So they charge you with murder and they can't convict you, but they later find more evidence, so they come back and charge you with conspiracy to commit the murder. Now, some jurisdictions will let you get away with that and some won't, in terms of charging them conspiracy later, but they are separate crimes, so sometimes you can do it and sometimes you can't. Depends where you are, but yes, sometimes you can do that, and it's a nice little way for the police to come back at you if they just found a different thing, because it can be a different crime. If an element of X, or if all the elements of X are included in Y, you can merge them. Yeah, that's also the double jeopardy rule. The way you know if a crime can be merged, and the way you know if it's double jeopardy or not, is Okay, how do I say this properly? In order for it not to be double jeopardy, the two crimes in question both have to have an element that is not contained in the other one. Yeah. So if in order for it not to be double jeopardy, both crimes have to have an element that's not contained in the other one. So to make this a little bit simpler, you could have crime one, which has elements A, B, C, and crime two, which has elements A, B, D. Right. So crime one has C, but crime two doesn't. Crime two has D, but crime one doesn't. Therefore, they're distinct crimes. Therefore, it's not double jeopardy. If crime one is ABC and crime two is ABCD, then you can't do that because while the one has D, the other one, they don't both have elements. The other doesn't. So you need to have them distinct, and that's also the rule for merger. So for conspiracy, you have to like the presence of the other person, I believe, is what gets you there, because you can't have a conspiracy of one, and so the element that you have is that second person, I think, is what makes it distinct. Yeah, merger applies to battery or murder. Well, yeah, it may as a matter of law. um yeah, so usually like anything that like would merge you up. So I don't know the battery is a lesser included of murder. I'd actually have to look it up. I guess it technically would have to be, right? Because again, every element. Well, does every is every element of murder contained in a is every element of battery inside a murder statute? I guess it would have to be, right? Because in a battery statute, you're like performing force on another person. So every element of a battery statute is also in a murder statute. It just has the murder statute also has other stuff. So so I'd imagine that yeah, yeah, yeah. Murder is just battery with extra steps. Yeah. Was the movie Double Jeopardy hold up at all? No, absolutely not. And it's such a thing that makes lawyers cringe. No, it wouldn't. The reason that the movie Double Jeopardy doesn't work, among other reasons, is that they're distinct crimes. Because they are totally distinct crimes. So because they're different time because they different events. So the way I kind of illustrated this example is stealing a car. You know, I am convicted of stealing a car on a particular day. As it turns out, I didn't steal that car on that particular day. I was wrongfully convicted. At some point later, I decide to steal the car, and I did in fact steal the car. Now I have stolen the exact same car. Is that double jeopardy? Of course not, because it's a separately distinct act. I didn't actually steal the car the first time. I was wrongfully convicted. That's very sad. But can I be charged for stealing the car the second time I stole the car, even though I didn't really steal it the first time? Yes, of course I can, because they're wholly distinct acts. So same analysis. She was convicted of killing the guy on one particular instance. Well, that was falsely convicted. How do we know? Well, he's still alive. Yeah, that's how we know. Okay, great. So now it's a different time on a different date. I could shoot you in the middle of Mardi Gras, and they have to let me go. No. And Tommy Lee Jones, I can assure you she's right. No, she's not, Tommy. She's definitely not right. It's a distinct crime. Yes, it's the same person, but it's a distinct event. It's a distinct crime. The law will be happy to convict you a second time. Sorry about the first conviction, but you definitely killed the guy this time. What about copyright law merger doctrine? What about copyright law merger doctrine? $5 from Willie Czar. Love your opinions, but you are clear when it doesn't support the law. You're fair. I try very, very hard to be fair. I just try to read the law as best as I can. I don't necessarily think it's good or bad a lot of times, but I'll express my opinion when I do. I think it's a dangerous power for the president to release this power. But on the other hand, this would be a circumstance where at least it's arguably warranted. Now, you'd want to do it in very sort of narrowed circumstances. You wouldn't want to do it nationwide, obviously. You'd only want to do it in the areas where there is unrest to bring back the order. But, the Constitution does require the federal government to guarantee a Republican form of government. And if the civil authorities of the relevant jurisdiction aren't doing it because either they're too cowardly or too whatever, then one of the things the federal government can and probably should do is restore the order. So, while I think it's while I think it is a power to be used with extreme caution, some of the things that we've been reading about suggest, for example, I mean, I don't know how neither here nor there this is, but man, they tagged the World War II memorial in D.C. They tagged the World War II memorial in D.C. How much sympathy do you want me to have for these people, man? Lord. 499 from Ray Rajan. I know, Rajan. I think Trump should implement the draft and get these kids some meaning in their lives. Can the president enact the draft? No, because I think the draft board still exists, but I think that they would have to be reactivated by congressional statute. I don't think the president can just draft people for the hell of it. I'm pretty sure he can't do that. No. The draft board still exists. And the reason I know the draft board still exists is because the librarian in my law school was a member and is a member of the draft board. And the reason I know that is because, for reasons that pass understanding, he was a very formal guy and he always wore a blazer. It wasn't like blue, but he wore like, a sports coat kind of thing. And the pin he wore in his lapel was for the draft board every day. I don't know why. I don't know why he thought this was a good idea. But I asked him about it once. Why are you wearing a pin for the draft board? Because I'm a member of the draft board. Okay, well, that's great. I don't know what his politics were, but he was very, very conservatively dressed, and he acted very sort of like Nixon-esque in sort of, no, Nixon's not really the right way to put it, like 1950s, 1960s conservative kind of style. He was a very interesting guy, and apparently he's a member of the draft board, and he's very happy to let people know. So the draft board still exists. They are apparently ready to go, but to the best of my knowledge, they can't actually do anything unless Congress passes a law. But the draft board still is a thing. I don't know if they get paid. I hope not. Most of these people wouldn't make it through basic. That's a fair point. Rajan, yeah. Reuters reports were attacked in D.C. Is it just me or weird to see people in the UK protesting over this? I don't know. I don't know if it's weird or not. We've certainly protested in the U.S. about things happening in other countries. So I don't know if it's weird for them to protest about things happening in our country if they think it's weird. What are gay small? Yeah, like a tweed jacket kind of thing. Very interesting guy. They also have a lot of legal issues with women in the draft. Women can't be drafted under the current law. Not that I think they should be drafted. I think there's lots of things women can do. Not necessarily. I mean, you need lots of people for the army, not necessarily all frontline. And why not draft women? They can serve, and even if you don't want to put them on the front lines, there's a lot of things they can do in terms of logistic support and otherwise. So, yeah. So I don't know what's going to be happening with all this stuff in terms of where our social fabric is going, and I don't know what it means for the country and all those things. I try not to overreact to things because we've been through trying times as a country before, and we've been through more trying times within living memory. I didn't live there, but I would say we lived through more trying times in the 60s and 70s than even now. Yeah, some of the things the weathermen did back in the day were really wow. So, and some of the things that the Black Panthers used to do in the back of the day were wow. So I'm not quite sure that we're up to that kind of territory. So I do have a little bit of faith that we are not beyond a bend somewhere. But that being said, it is concerning seeing what is happening with the people right now. I don't know how much of it is real and how much of it is simulated. I don't know how much of it is. Well, let me rephrase what I mean by that. When I say that it's simulated, I don't mean that it's being artificially created. What I mean is that the people who are doing it aren't doing it genuinely. I think they're doing well. I don't know, but I suspect because I watched how they behave, and I don't know if it's a fair conclusion, but it was a conclusion I drew because I went to the thing like 3 times just to observe people and see what they were doing. But it seemed to me that they were doing it. A lot of them were doing it because they seemed to be like a mob. They seemed to be doing it because they seemed like it was the thing that they were expected to do. It wasn't that they were doing it because they thought it was right. It seemed to be that they were. I use the term virtue signaling advisedly because I understand someone might have been doing it genuinely, but some of them seem to be doing it more almost in like I was there to prove how great I was and kind of way that. So I don't know how much of it is genuine and how much of it is for show by the people who are doing it. But I got the sense that at least some of them were doing it for show. Now I don't know that all of them were, but I think some of them were, and I think maybe more of them than not. So I don't know. But then again, if you're a business owner and your property's being broken into and burned down, your stuff looted, do you really care? Probably not that much. $10 from fire makes me king. Ugh, the draft. My number was picked for Vietnam. The draft ended 2 days later. Yes, the race riots of the 70s were no fun. Lived in New York City. That's what I'm saying. You know, we've been through some pretty horrible times in our country, and I don't know that we're necessarily anywhere close to some of that stuff that happened in the 60s and 70s. I have read a little bit of history, so I do have a little bit of things keeping in perspective. I have actually read history because I like reading, and some of the stuff that happened, I'm like, I don't know, man. You know, we're not quite to the people setting up explosives and blowing things up stage of the unrest. We're not quite to what some of what the people did in the 60s and 70s when there were a disturbing amount of explosions that happened in a disturbing amount of places and a disturbing number of people were hurt and killed in the name of a cause that is not even clear at this point. But thank you very much for the super chat. We haven't been in more trying times in my lifetime, nor mine either. I'm 39, so I was born in 81. So we haven't been more trying times in my lifetime either. But I try to have some historical perspective about where things are and where things are going. So it's collapsing, my friend. The whole thing is a perfect storm. U.S. is losing global market. Plants in a recession. U.S. is in the same place USSR is in 85. It's scary. I don't think it's that bad. I don't think it's that bad. I think the Soviet Union had a lot less things going for them in 85 than we do now. I mean, our economy is pretty strong and pretty robust. Even with everything that's happened, it's pretty strong and pretty robust. The United States is something like a sixth of the entire world economy. You know, so it's a huge market. There is, even with all the unemployment that's going on, you know, there's still a lot of commerce that's going on, and the signs for the future are fairly bright economically. You know, a lot of this was very artificial due to the pandemic, and I think a lot of this, incidentally, is at least the pandemic. I also have some thoughts about that, but let me try to do two thoughts at once. But I think a lot of it is the pandemic and people being pent up about it, and they're expressing frustration. So I think that's amplifying the situation extensively. So I think there's some artificiality there as well. But watching how people have responded to this has been really, really interesting to me in terms of the pandemic. Here's why it's really, really interesting to me. If we all go back in our minds like 2 weeks ago, does everyone remember 2 weeks ago? I remember 2 weeks ago. All right, let's talk about 2 weeks ago. Circa 2 weeks ago. Circa 2 weeks ago, the media was very, very unhappy about the protesters who were out in the streets. What protesters out in the streets circa 2 weeks ago? Oh, the people who were against lockdowns, those protesters. You remember those people? Yeah, you remember those people, the anti-lockdown protesters? And remember how unhappy the media was about them and how they were out and about and protesting? And some of them were protesting without masks, and they were gathering in a public place, and they would spread the COVID. Remember all that? Remember that from 2 weeks ago? How very, very unhappy they were that people were protesting, and some of them didn't have masks, and some of them weren't social distancing, and they were going to spread the COVID. Well, as it turns out, we cured COVID. We cured COVID. I know. It's amazing. We cured the disease. How do I know we cured the disease? Well, because I've been watching the news. And I mean, the people are out in the streets, and they're not social distancing, and they're not wearing masks. And I haven't heard any of the media say anything about how these people are spreading the COVID. So the only conclusion I can draw is we cured COVID. I'm not sure how it happened. I'm not sure how it happened, but apparently we cured COVID sometime in the last 2 weeks. I'm not sure how. I didn't hear an announcement about the cure being happening, but it must have occurred because 2 weeks ago the media was super super upset about the protesters who were protesting against lockdowns because they weren't social distancing and weren't wearing masks and so forth and so on. But now the media not saying a word about the spread of the COVID because of the protests, not hearing that in the reports. So it must mean we cured the disease. Or alternatively, here's another idea. Alternatively, because these particular protests suit the media's narrative, they don't care. And they didn't really care about the protesters 2 weeks ago either. That was just that it didn't support their narrative. So they didn't really care about people who were protesting. It was just a chance to make points. And they don't really care that people are protesting now. It's just an opportunity to make points. Everything is politics now because we live in the stupidest timeline. So 2 weeks ago, it was protesters are very, very bad because the spread of COVID is bad. But now it's protesters are very, very good and we don't care about the COVID because racial injustice and stuff. It's been fun to watch. That's been a fun time. Wait, does Uncivil not know about the Coalition for Men versus Selective Service? Oh, sure, I have known about cases against the Secret Service for sex-based discrimination. Yeah, I'm well familiar with people suing the Selective Service for not integrating women. I'm not sure if I say anything contrary to that, but yeah, I'm still well aware of that. The Anarchist Cookbook is downloadable, yes, but it's not that great. I recommend the improvised field manual instead. It's much better. So get the improvised. I think it's called the improvised munitions army field manual, something like that. Get that. It's much better than the Anarchist Cookbook. Do you think Doomsday Punkers are going to get a business silver lining? I don't know about that. Americans are the last most free people in the world. We got this. I think we are pretty free. The United States is a pretty great place to live, and we're pretty free. And it's pretty nice. And depending on your point of view, we are the most free. There are a lot of other countries where you can make an argument, but we're pretty free. It's a nice place to live. I'll certainly put our First Amendment against anyone, and it drives me crazy every year when there's the report from the World Press Organization and they rank who's the most free press. And the United States usually winds up like 30th or 40th. And I'm like, I don't know what criteria you can possibly be using because we are way more free in the United States than anywhere else. I think this could blow over by next week. Yeah, I think it's a flash in the pan too. I think it's a flash in the pan. But it'll be interesting if Donald Trump re-wins the election. And it'll be interesting if, after having done so, Ruth Bader Ginsburg leaves the bench and Trump makes an appointment. I take note of the protests that occurred with Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, and I speculate that the protests, as it would relate from Trump to a potential nominee for Ginsburg, might be of a different character, or tenor, or degree. Oh, by the way, because I know you guys want to know, this is so off field, but my quest to find a Texas-made hat continues. So I haven't been able to go many places, and due to issues with IT today, I wasn't able to work today, which made me sad. But it gave me the opportunity to check out a hat store. So I went to a hat store. I went to a master hat shop in Georgetown, Texas, who apparently this guy's pretty well known. He's done stuff for various musicians and mayors and movies and stuff like that. And he told me two things. Well, first of all, he said, "How big is your head? I'm not sure I can make a hat for you." This is a guy with 25 years experience who's a master. He's like, "I'm not sure I can accommodate you because your head is so big." So that was nice. A little blow to my ego. That was good. How big is your head? Well, let's measure it. Oh, it's 26 1/4 inches around. Okay, well, that's a lot. And he informs me that the way they normally make a custom hat for someone is they have some kind of machine or whatever they put on your head. And apparently this machine is from the 19th century. So this machine is like 130 years old. So he said, well, normally what I would do to make a custom hat is I'd put this thing on your head. that would help me like contour your head. But for you, my friend, not so much. It wouldn't fit. We'll have to make something up. We have to make it up. It'll be a challenge because your head is so big, it will not go into the 130-year-old machine. That was super encouraging. So that was good news. But then he said, well, no, okay, I think I can do it. I think I can do it. But then he told me two pieces of information that made me sad. The first piece of information he said is, I work by myself and it's my wife, and I have 180 orders already. So it's going to take 9 months to make a hat for you. 9 months. That's good. And the second thing he said is it's going to cost $750. That was good news. So my quest to find a hat continues. But I was looking today, but apparently my head is so freaking big, it is a challenge even for the masters. So the 26.25-inch head is an issue for people. And I'm sure someone in the chat is converting that to meters, and everyone's going, oh my God, oh my God. But all I have to say is, you know what they say about someone with a big head. So, yeah. 2 weeks was the end before time, yeah. Second Amendment protests are the most peaceful ever. I know, it's great. Remember January? It was this January, yeah. Remember January when there was 30 to 50,000 people in the streets of Richmond protesting for the Second Amendment, and pretty much all of them had guns? Remember that? And there was a total of 1 arrest during that for someone who refused to wear a mask, to remove a mask after being worn many, many, many times. Because this was in the before time when we didn't do masks. So there was a time when wearing a mask were illegal, like January. So yes, in January, and he was wearing a mask not for disease reasons, but just because he's being a jackass. So yeah, there was 1 arrest, and there were no problems with the 50,000 people with guns marching on Richmond. The left seems to not be able to do it as well as the right. The right are much people. I like Jordan Peterson quite a lot. I'm a Jordan Peterson fanboy. I'm a bit of a Jordan Peterson fanboy. I met him once in person at a VIP event. And, I didn't really get as much as I hoped for. Because, like everyone else, I want him to adopt me. But I listen to a lot of what he says. It's great stuff. Yeah. 2 weeks ago, we not seen the media turn to elites from Capitol from Hunger Games. Well, for those of us who are more conservative leaning, some of us have had the opinion that they were already there. So it's not so much that maybe it's become more apparent to you. But yes, that they were the elites from Hunger Games. I was there. They talk about how COVID kills more blacks, so we're evil racists. Apparently, the media has not learned about comorbidity somehow. They didn't care about Antifa since before Trump was elected, yeah. Blackleaf just do a YouTube search on COVID and the flow of see all the reports you claim media isn't making. Fair. Hey, look, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm not watching all. I apologize. It's not been any media I've seen, so maybe my sources are biased, but that's not been the reporting I've seen. But that there's other people who are reporting about the COVID in relation to the Floyd protests, I believe you. So, if I just not in the media I've seen at least. So maybe my sources are biased, but that's not been what I've been seeing. But, it's nice to know someone's reporting on somewhere. Keep with the theme. 2 weeks of people were begging people to go out to business. Now 400 people go to Target's a big deal. Trump violates the Posse Comitatus Act, and Curtis is complaining about left-wingers. I guess you missed the earlier part of the stream, Matt. We discussed exactly how Trump is not violating the Posse Comitatus Act. But we'll do the quick and dirty for Matt because he maybe came late. That's okay. We'll do the quick and dirty for Matt. So the quick and dirty is, here's the Posse Comitatus Act, 18 U.S.C. 1385. Your operative provision that we're looking for says, whoever, except in cases and under circumstances expressly authorized by the Constitution or an act of Congress. So we are looking for either authority under the Constitution or an act of Congress, because then we'd be under the exception. So we have two that plausibly apply. We have Article 4, Section 4 from the Constitution. The United States shall guarantee to every state a Republican form of government, and upon application of the legislature or executive from that state may ensure against domestic violence. So upon request, you can do it. And under 10 USC 253, the president, by use of the militia or armed forces, may take such measures as he deems necessary to suppress any insurrection, domestic violence, or unlawful condition that opposes obstruction of justice, deprives peoples of rights, blah, 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 blah. So Trump is not, in fact, violating Posse Comitatus because he has authority, because there is an act of Congress that says he can. And Posse Comitatus itself says, whoever, unless the Constitution or an act of Congress says otherwise, well, I have one. I have one in 10 USC 253. So it's not a violation of Posse Comitatus. So we discussed that earlier. Depends on what freedoms you're talking about. We're doing pretty good with speech. Even some famous socialists, yeah. North Korea was ranked #1 free press. How can you have a free press when you don't have press? Cuba 2 and China 3. Yeah, these are definitely places with freedom of press. Germans don't restrict speech. Just hate speech. How dumb an argument is that? I'm not sure what argument you're saying is dumb. The argument that Germans don't restrict speech. The argument that Germans don't restrict speech is just pretty stupid, because they do restrict hate speech. I really love that one with Crowder. I don't watch everything he does, but I did see that one at least where he was arguing about free speech, and the woman from Germany is like, "You suppress freedom of speech." And she's like, "No, we don't. No, we don't. It's all lies. No, we don't." And then she's like, "Well, with forced crimes, of course we win." He goes, "Well, what do you want?" Blah, blah, blah. And she didn't even see the cognitive dissonance. It was hilarious. TGE gender draft was ruled unconstitutional. Couldn't they activate the draft anymore? A gender draft was ruled unconstitutional. If there was a case that actually said that, then I wasn't aware of it. I was aware of lawsuits, but I wasn't aware that it being declared unconstitutional. So you may be outside my knowledge base on that one. I was definitely aware of people trying. I was unaware of any successful. So you might have one on me on that one. There's rumors of Clarence Thomas when he stepped down. There was definitely rumors of that last year too. People laughing at me about the hat thing. You're 22 and an eighth. You're nowhere near as cool as me. You lack 2 inches on me, Dirk. 2 inches, baby. Yeah, 26. I don't think you can buy a motorcycle helmet. When I bought one for racing, when I was racing for a little bit, it was very hard. Yeah, contact trace all the trips. Yeah, and $750. $750 didn't throw me off. The 9 months was what threw me off. So $750 for the hat didn't throw me off. What actually threw me off was the 9 months. I'm like, that is a long time to wait for a hat. So I'm going to shop around a little bit and see if we can do any better. Jordan's daughter is crazy. I don't know if it goes so far as to say she's crazy, although I don't watch everything she does, but she has some views, and she's an interesting character. There's an unknown error at Google and Apple on contract. That's good news. $20 trillion for reparations is supposed to solve the problem, according to someone in DC. If I thought $20 trillion would solve the problem, then I'd figure out a way to make it work. Epstein has the instruction key. Hello, everyone. That Crowder video was good. A lot of Crowder videos are very entertaining. His argumentation style is a little disingenuous sometimes, because he makes these counter arguments in a way that is good for comedy but not so good for the debate, and it throws you off sometimes when he's doing this change your mind segments. So sometimes he's good, but sometimes he can be a little bit. Sometimes he's a little bit judo-y in his moves, and I take notice, and it's a little bit annoying. But he's not bad. I'm a member of Mug Club. I think I threw away my mug. Also, I don't have my Ben Shapiro mug anymore, so I'm sad. National Coalition for Men versus Selective Service. Let's take a quick look at that. Why not? We're just talking amongst ourselves at this point. Let's take a quick look and see what that case says. Court case, United States District Court for Southern District. So this is district court and was appealed to Fifth Circuit. So it's, yeah, February 2019. It's on appeal. Oral arguments were held March 3rd. So no decision from the Fifth Circuit. So yeah, I wouldn't expect that to live long for this world, but interesting. Yeah, because it was a district court decision, I guess it missed my attention. But yeah, that's been appealed, and so we'll see where that's going to go. Oral arguments were held at Tulane Law School in New Orleans. Interesting. That doesn't happen every day, where you have oral arguments for a case at a law school rather than a courtroom. Sure, why not? We might have to do the oral arguments on that one. That might be fun. $5 from Paul Delaney. Thank you, Paul, for the super chat. Super appreciate it. What are your thoughts on dirty cops starting fires so they can crack down on protesters? I saw a report saying a cop started a fire at Target. You'd have to know why. I mean, again, you'd have to know like a little bit more about it. So assuming it happened, you'd want to know why. Why was that happening? Because there might be a reason other than what's obvious, so. But assuming they were doing it, because they were trying to, pretend that they were the protesters in order to give a justification, then that would not be good. So assuming they were doing it for nefarious reasons, that is not good. I don't believe the police should do things like that for nefarious reasons. To give themselves more authority to do something they wouldn't otherwise have, that's not good. It feels like it strikes the conscience. Any chances George Floyd was Epstein hiding? I'm going to go with no. I'm still thinking about the hat. I'm still thinking about it. I'm just going to make a couple other inquiries first. My subscription to Daily Wire hasn't run out, so the Ben Shapiro Tumblr with the leftist tears. Yes, I apologize. I'm very sorry. Yeah, $700 isn't bad. It's just the 9 months was a problem. There's another shop or two I want to try before I make that decision, but I might go back. He showed me a hat called a Gus style. We were going to do it in this nice like gunmetal color, and we were going to do with like a black band, so you can do like a band around the hat. And we're thinking about like a shorter one, because he had this really tall band on one that was like 1.5 inches. So maybe cut that in half and do maybe like an offset. So maybe do like a dark blue or something. It could be fun. Thank you, Cody Sams, for becoming a supporter. It's nice to have you as a supporter. Really appreciate it. If all you other people who are not yet supporters, for 99 cents, you can support the second fastest growing well, okay, let me redo that. Let me redo it. The fastest growing conservative legal podcast in the nation. That's me. So you can join the fastest growing conservative legal podcast for 99 cents. And you too will get a Tumblr, except I won't actually send you one. But you'll have one in your mind. You'll have a mental Tumblr that will fill with tears. And you can have that. That'll be good. So you too can join it. Yeah, the Gustave hat? Excellent. Yeah, like gunmetal gray. It was really looking good. It was going to be sharp. Did I miss explanation of how it doesn't violate Posse Comitatus? Yeah, but that's okay. We'll do it again. I mean, that's why we're here. So I'll do it again. I don't mind. We can do the quick version. Thank you, Furby Slayer, for the supporter. You need to get a supporter role in Discord. I lost it every time I forget to re-up to Leonard. I can't give you anything in Leonard's channel because I don't have admin privileges or mods privileges in Leonard's channel. So I can't do anything in Leonard's channel in terms of creating a space for myself or anything like that. I'm just borrowing Leonard's channel because I don't think I have enough supporters at this point to justify my channel on my own. At some point, I probably will do a Discord, but in the meantime, I'm happy to borrow Leonard's, and because it's a place where I spend a lot of my time anyway. It's a place where I can be found. So I send people there. Well, I send people there for a couple reasons. One, Leonard's my friend, and so I want to support him. Two, it's a place where people can find me, and so it's a place where discussion is going. And so I can't really do anything in terms of getting you supporter level or anything on Discord. So maybe someday, but later. U.S. versus Stanley, 1986. Why am I not a mod? I don't know. You'd have to ask Leonard. I'm not in a position. I think the reason, Leonard is my friend. Leonard is my friend, and he's my friend. But I think the reason is just genuinely our politics are too far apart. If I had to guess, I've never asked him for it because it doesn't seem like the kind of thing I want to ask for. If he wants to offer it to me, that's fine. But I'm not going to ask. But he's never offered it to me. If I had to take a reason, it's because we don't see eye to eye. Not for the least of reasons that his channel manager is a guy named Brandon. And what is something I'm willing to say about this on the record? Brandon and I have political differences. So, Brandon is his channel manager and essentially his head moderator. And we have political differences. So, don't really see that happening any time in the near future. Anyways, going back to the why is this not a constitutional thing? So, yes, here's the Posse Comitatus Act, 18 U.S.C. 1385. And the language that you want, I'll make it a little bit bigger because it's a little bit hard to see on screen. But the language you're looking for, it says, whoever, except in cases and under circumstances, except in cases and under circumstances expressly authorized by the Constitution or Act of Congress, deploys the military. So you have your carve out right in the middle of the Posse Comitatus Act, except in cases and under circumstances expressly authorized by the Constitution or Act of Congress. So this doesn't apply if you have something in the Constitution or the Act of Congress. So you want one of those two things. So you have two potential legal bases. One is here, Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, which says that upon application of the legislature or upon request of the executive of any given state, the United States can protect them against domestic violence, which of course in this case means civil unrest. So if the state governor asks you to, you can do it because we have to guarantee to each state a Republican form of government. And then the United States Code gives you another justification, 10 U.S.C. 253. The president, by use of militia or armed forces or both, or by any other means, shall take measures as he considers necessary to suppress in any state, which we have learned means Guam and Puerto Rico, which also means Guam and Puerto Rico, any insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination, or conspiracy if it would hinder the application of law. So that's why it's not unconstitutional, because 10 U.S.C. 253 says it's not. And the Posse Comitatus Act says that if you have another authorization, you're good, and so this works. So they're not in conflict, and there you go. That's how you get it. No problem. I don't think I was ever banned from Leonard's Discord. I couldn't swear to it. But not that I remember. You sent me citations in Discord for what? From the decision from the district court? Yeah, from the Southern District of Texas. Cool. Yeah, okay, I have that. United States versus Stanley, 1986. Let's see what that has to teach me. I don't know that case. What does it have to say? Let's see. Federal Tort Claims Act. Master Sergeant voluntarily participating in hallucinations and emotions. All right, I'm gonna have to speed read the syllabus of this decision. Hold on. Respond to service volunteer for was absent. Doctrine, Ferris Doctrine, okay, which precludes liability of FTC and liability for servicemen. So Ferris Doctrine is a principle that essentially forbids military people from suing for things that happen to them in a military context. So it's called Ferris Doctrine. So this is military members. So they said Ferris Doctrine precludes liability for servicemen incident service. Although agreeing that respondent had at least collateral claims under Bivens, which gives you alternative relief action, whereby violation can give rise to damages even in the absence of statute unless there's special factors or explicit authorization. The respondent admitted to put in Bevan and attempt to respond to the claim, although later refused to dismiss, rejecting the government's argument, same consideration should constitute special factors. I would think it would. Although then vacated the order, the court subsequently reaffirmed Bivens as to individual federal deployments, despite broadly stating home holding the military duty, blah, blah, all those issues not been addressed. Hell, the district court's reinstatement was error, authorizes appeal only from orders served, not in orders. Jurisdiction was limited. The court of appeals error and respondent can comply with Bivens. Argument not responses, incident service unavailable since service incident directed response change can. Yeah, so so United States versus Stanley is a fairly specific decision dealing with military lawsuits. So having sped read the syllabus, what it basically says is a military member engaged in a thing that where he was exposed to LSD to test the drug. He wanted to sue. They said no initially. The Court of Appeals said try a Bivens action, which is kind of the 1983 equivalent for federal officials, but it's been, I think, applied like total of twice since they invented it. So it's very disfavored, but it technically exists. So they said, oh, you can't get to the Federal Tort Claim Act because of this case called Ferris, which sounds pretty right. So you can't do this because of Ferris Doctrine, because of military contracts. Okay. And then he came back up on appeal. The Court of Appeals refused to do anything about it and said, yeah, you can sue. And the U.S. Supreme Court said, no, not so much. Which, no, not so much, seems the right answer, legally. So it seems like a pretty clear error. What was the holding on this anyway? It was... it looks like there was some dissents in part. So it looks like it was 6-3, but there were dissents in part. So without looking at more, it's not clear what parts they were dissenting to. So I'm not sure if it was unanimous with respect to the parts we care about or 6-3. But either way, it was there. There you go. You agree with Viva and the minority opinion of the Supreme Court that church is more similar to restaurants and pharmacies than lectures and concerts. Do I agree with Viva and the minority opinion of the Supreme Court that church is more similar to restaurants and pharmacies than lectures and concerts? I'm not sure that I mean, I haven't watched everything Viva produces. I watched a lot of it. I'm not sure Viva ever said that, and I'm definitely pretty sure the Supreme Court never said that. But in terms of like what churches are similar to or not, at least under the Lemon Test, for all the good it does, because the Lemon Test is kind of dead, but you would look at it as close as it would be parallel to other situations. So I don't know what the nearest analog to a church would be, but presumably it would be closer to like a theater or a sporting event than like a restaurant because of how everyone's seated. But I don't know. I do think that at least in some of these cases, the places have not justified their reasoning. So I did see where Viva said that the court was saying in that one slip opinion in dissent that the government was not making the right analysis. So they were not making the analysis the right way. So they were just not making the right arguments. So if that was the issue, then that's one thing, but whatever. I'm happy being an undercover and civil agitator. I found you through Viva. I am a bum, but something. I'm bummed by ask hypotheticals. Most humans are too emotionally even to ponder. Yeah. Leonard isn't as vocal. That's true. Leonard is more quiet about his political opinions than me, which might be one of the reasons that we get along, but Brandon is not. And Brandon is his chief moderator and his editor, and we do not get along. And I have muted him on Discord because of how much he irritates me. So I have muted Brandon, his chief moderator, in Discord, so I can no longer see his content. We do not agree. I find him to be, yeah. Ned says, put this way, as a genuine far left, you're not going to hear me complaining about Blackleaf. Excellent, thank you. I like to at least have my reasoning show. I like to I like to show my work, and people see behind the scenes, and I'd like it to all make sense. Because one of the things that conservatives consider a conceit is that it's all supposed to be reasoned and rational. Now, that ultimately breaks down because it's hard to make everything perfect. But Lord knows we try to have consistent principles and apply places. So conservatives tend to reason from rules and order and try to do things from first principles and try to apply that consistently. And sometimes it's really hard. And sometimes I run into issues where I can't do it for a variety of reasons, but I try. So thank you. That it's nice to know that, agree or disagree, that it seems to all make sense. Cody says that we have major political differences. You're still a decent person as far as you present yourself online. I'd like to think I'm pretty true to life online. I'm a little, maybe if anything, I'm just a little bit more outgoing online than I am in person. In person, maybe I'm a little bit more reserved, but I feel a little bit more free. So that's nice. It helps me become a little bit more open than I would be otherwise. So that's nice. But I feel like I'm pretty genuine. I'm pretty, it's funny too, because my mom gives me such crap too. Because, my because I talk to my mom like I talk to everyone else. I mean, I talk to her politely, but I don't give her a lot of slack sometimes. My mom's like, you're supposed to give your mother special things. I'm like, no, either your arguments are reasonable or not. So you're supposed to give things to your mother. I love my mother, by the way. She's a wonderful, wonderful person. I love her to death. She's wonderful, but I do act pretty consistently, and I don't let my mom get away with things, and I give her a hard time, which at least to me shows respect. I treat her arguments with respect, like she was someone else. She says, "No, you're supposed to not do that. You're just supposed to treat me like your mother." I love my mom. I think she's wonderful. She's a wonderful lady, and she's a hell of a cook too. I love my dad too. I love my parents. They're great. I love my brother Ross. If you're out there somewhere, I love you. I miss you. I think you're wonderful. I'm sorry we live so far apart. I think you're great. I wish we were better friends. We're great brothers, but we're not particularly great friends because we're different personalities. My brother and I would not be friends but for us being brothers, which I suppose is good enough because it brings someone in my life who I wouldn't otherwise, but I love him to death. Ross, wherever you are, you're the man. As a left-winger myself, the first immoral says, as a left-winger myself, it's more interesting to see a conservative take. Challenges me. Not of interest for me when everyone agrees. I like listening to left-leaning people who have an intelligent brain and something to say. I like listening to people who disagree, who have something to say, and I like when people make good points. I like Ben Shapiro way more than I do Crowder because I think Ben Shapiro is more coherent in his thoughts. I like Jordan Peterson quite a lot. I'm not sure how conservative he necessarily is. He's not very political, so he's a little bit weird to measure on that spectrum. Crowder's okay, but he has a very interesting style, and when he does those things with Change My Mind, sometimes I don't know that he knows he's doing it, but he sometimes responds in ways that are not particularly helpful to moving the conversation forward. He has these like lines that are very sort of problematic. I did see the space explode. That was sad. Not the space shuttle one, no, the different one. We should move the capital to Guam. I gave this speech one time for Toastmasters where I said my plan. One of my parts of the world domination plan was everyone moves to Guam except me. So everyone moves to Guam. I'm like, there's plenty of space. We can build it up. So everyone Guam. It's part of my world domination plan. Everyone Guam. Yeah, that was not nominal. It was nice. Has the governor asked the president to bring in the military? Not as far as I'm aware, but as I pointed out, that only would be from the constitutional section. Under the other thing, he doesn't need the governor's ask. So there's two different things. Like the stream, that'd be great. Yeah, governor doesn't have to in Title 10 of the U.S. Code. Do you watch JREG videos? He's a political satirist. No, I do not. That might be fun. Politically, Jan says, I politically honestly disagree with you, but legally there's a lot of value to what you do. Thank you. And I give you legal interpretations even though I don't want to reach them sometimes because I'm pretty consistent to my principles. So I give you readings even if I don't want to, and I try to be consistent. And when people challenge me, I do 4-hour live streams of here's all your challenges, and here's why I think the way I do, and here's all my reasons here's all the ways I've supported my work. So try to show you the rationale. So thank you. Emus the Fox gave me Mr. Fox gave me $5 and said, as someone on the left, I love watching you gain your insight. As something complicated politics, we're both likely wrong anyway. Fair enough. We probably are. Shapiro's not regional. His arguments are so fallacious. Releasing to him is less than frustration. Interesting. I don't really find it that way, but maybe it's going past my filters. So maybe he is. Maybe you're noticing things I'm not picking up on, but I don't find him to be fallacious. But maybe you're picking up things I'm not picking up on. I mean, I like him, so I'm not sure what that says about anything, but I listen to him lots. If Trump sued impeachment, if he actually got impeached, no court would touch that with a 10-foot span. There's no way that's going to happen. Posse Comitatus does not apply with the Insurrection Act. Why not? Why not? Here's Posse Comitatus, 18 U.S.C. 1385. This is Posse Comitatus Act. And it says, whoever, except in cases and under circumstances expressly authorized by the Constitution or an act of Congress, willfully uses any part of the army. So it doesn't apply in cases and under circumstances authorized by the Constitution or act of Congress. So why would Title 10 United States Code 253 not work? Because it's an act of Congress. The president, by use of them, shall do these things. Why would when it says except in cases expressly authorized by an act of Congress? Well, this is an act of Congress. So why would this not work? Why would this not apply? I haven't done any new shopping for a webcam though. Yes. I mean, if you think that Posse Comitatus does not apply with the Insurrection Act, I'd love to know why, but I can't see any obvious reason. It looks like it does. Do you think the 4 body officers turning off their body cameras shows intent to do an illegal act? It certainly goes a long way to showing intent to do something. So as a fact to be submitted to a jury, it is not encouraging. Yeah, when you turn off your body cameras, it's not encouraging. So that fact will definitely not help them. If you get huge on YouTube, you'll not be able to respond to the haters. That's true. Do the judge in Flynn pays the response? Not as far as I'm aware. Yes. Fox Flames says, are you Virginian transported to Texas? Yes, I am. I moved here 2 months ago. I have the Texas flag now in the corner. I just bought a really nicer one, by the way. So it should be here at some point in the future. So I bought a nice flag in a nice wooden frame. So at some point it should be there and it'll be a lot nicer. But at the moment I have the cheap metal one for the place. But yes, I moved here 2 months ago. I'm enjoying it. Rick says, in time of lawlessness and civil unrest, that's suspended for a brief period of time like martial law. Martial law is again a slightly different concept. Martial law can only to do martial law under ex parte Milligan. You can only do martial law if the courts are unable to meet. So if the courts are still able to meet, then you can't have martial law. But martial law is also a more narrow concept, because in martial law you don't have a civilian authority anymore. It's just the military running things as a military authority, and this is a little bit different. So I don't think that triggering this qualifies as martial law. I think they're distinct. Now I think you could try to make that argument in a court. So I don't think it's a fully insane argument to say this is the same thing as martial law, but I don't think it necessarily is, because the idea of the president being able to go in and use the troops to restore order without it being martial law, I'm not sure this is necessarily the same thing, but you might be able to get there. You might be able to say that this wouldn't work except in a martial law circumstance, but I don't think it's quite that narrow, but it's not a bad argument. Yeah, it should be like the fifth. In a civil case, it'd be used against you. Well, we'll into a jury. The jury will hear about that, and the jury will absolutely take against them. Texas seems like a great place for Virginians this day. I tell you what, I'm a lot happier with my gun rights in Texas than I was before. The flag is Carolina colors with a blue stripe. I guess it is. I guess it kind of is, yeah. So peaceful protests are an insurrection, domestic violence? No, of course not. That would be insane. Peaceful protests are in absolutely no sense an insurrection or domestic violence. No, of course not. Who is making this argument? Literally no one is making this argument. Literally none of the people are making the argument that peaceful protests are an insurrection or domestic violence. Absolutely no one is making that argument, because if a person were making that argument, it'd be insane. Of course, peaceful protests are neither insurrection nor domestic violence, because that would be wacko. Who would be making this argument? This is insanity. No, of course not. Amos gives me $2. I'm a transplant from Texas. I miss it there a lot. Well, why did you leave, and why don't you come back? 4 officers turning off the cameras to go eat. It's entirely different to turn them off as to go somewhere to respond. Fair. How's the situation compare to the U.S. from that of Hong Kong re-protests? I don't know enough about the situation in Hong Kong to make an intelligent comment. I tend to focus a lot more on domestic news than I do international news, so I'm not as familiar with what's happening in Hong Kong. Of course, what's happening in Hong Kong is also complicated by Chinese law and treaties and a whole bunch of other situations. So I'm definitely not I'm now not able to comment intelligently. No. UCMJ also applies to active duty. Yes, UCMJ presumably would continue to apply. Texas flag is like a Polish flag with a blue stripe and a star. It could be the state of Poland. Okay. It's also like the North Carolina flag, as someone was making a point. The president sent military after peaceful protesters in D.C. Did he? After peaceful protesters in D.C.? I mean, you'd have to know a lot more about the situation. Exactly what's going on, but presumably the reason the military got deployed was not because of the peaceful protesters. And if they got swept up in it, then, again, when you're thinking about insurrection or domestic violence, you aren't necessarily thinking that everyone is doing those things. So the law enforcement's ability to act to restore order is going to necessarily implicate some people who are not necessarily breaking the law. Because, to give an example, if the police want to secure a street, for example, there might be people on the street who are not behaving unlawfully, but they might have the ability to do it for the purposes of the police action because of the need to restore order. So if the president had deployed troops who were doing things because of the insurrection, and they were, for the most part, doing that, and as part of whatever were also impacting people who are doing peacefully, then presumably that would be okay, because it's not what you're targeting. Again, as part of the restoring order thing. So, you can't deliberately target, but it'd be a little bit like military actions in general. You can't deliberately target the innocent as part of a military action. And you want to keep collateral damage to a minimum. So presumably you'd be following the same kind of rules, right? You don't want to target the innocent, and you want to keep collateral damage down. Now, preferably we're not using like guns and tanks and stuff, but the same concepts apply. So yes, you'd want to do that, but there's a limit to that in terms of practicality. DC was on fire last night. I know. I saw a lot of it too. They tagged the World War II memorial, man. That's a bridge too far. If DC was on fire. If you want to deploy the troops to restore order, I'm not sure that's necessarily going to be a problem. Matthew quotes me some case. Laird versus Tatum. All right, well, let's see what that has to say. It dismissed an action for unlawful surveillance. Looks like some pretty specific tough stuff dealing with Army intelligence and standing and ripeness. Looks like it's not really going to have any relevance to anything we're concerned about. Yeah, U.S. military police are in D.C. now. Yeah, there are no more protesters, just criminals. I mean, that might be a little bit overbroad, but I think they have the ability to act. Can the military protect businesses that want to stay open despite what a governor or mayor or police say? Um, I mean, the whole point of this is to restore order. So if I don't think that the idea of a business owner operating in defiance of the relevant state law, the military forcing it open, I don't particularly see that happening. But it's military. Us doesn't seem like a military objective. We're gonna stand and make sure your business stays open. Doesn't seem like a military objective. Doesn't seem like the kind of thing they're gonna do. I'm not quite sure if they're active or not. The rumor was that they were active, so I'm not quite sure exactly what's going on. But yeah, military have to follow orders. Well, they have to follow lawful orders, but we all know that, right? They can't follow. It's a great thing. They have to follow lawful orders, and they can't follow an unlawful order. And you better able to figure out which is which. Yeah, martial law is a little bit more constraining, I think. I don't think this is the same thing as martial law. Martial law means there's no civilian authority. It means the military are the ones that are doing the authority, and you can't do it if the courts are able to meet. So I don't think that 10 USC 253 means you're necessarily in a martial law state. Wouldn't the school board case say yes, since they used National Guard to secure the school? Um, the the president used the National Guard to secure the school, and I believe this was the authority he used, was exactly this authority to do that, to integrate the schools. So that's why I think it's not the same thing, because that was my understanding, was the president used this authority to integrate the schools. After COVID, do you think martial law really ever possible? We've definitely had martial law in limited times in the United States. We've had it at limited times in limited places. In U.S. history, it's been relatively rare. I don't think we're there. We're on the road to getting there somewhere, but we're not quite in that state yet. So less extreme measures are still okay. Yeah, the military would prioritize maintaining security for essential locations and places. Yeah, for restoring order. Yeah, they're just there to supplement. And using the military police is a really good idea. Before you break up the real army, just use the military police. That's a good place to start. COVID kind of shows courts can basically always meet. Yeah, that's true. So ex parte Milligan would be interesting in today's times, because, like, yeah, can the courts ever truly be not able to meet? We'd have to reconsider what ex parte Milligan means in today's environment. What does it mean for the courts being able to meet? $5 from MK Painter. Thank you very much for your super chat. It's super appreciated. There's a sale at Marshalls. Okay, noted. I'll go to Marshalls. Law enforcement, National Guard are crowd control. Any active actors are securing the infrastructure. Yeah, that makes sense. That's another exception to Posse Comitatus, by the way, where the military can provide logistical support. So that's totally possible too, and you see that not infrequently, where the military is deployed for the purposes of providing logistical back end support for the authority. You even saw with President Trump deploying some of the troops to the border to help ICE, which, as long as they're doing logistical support roles, then no problem. So that'd be another exception if they're just providing exceptional logistics support. So that would be fine then, and it's Posse Comitatus would not apply. The University of Alabama put out an 11,000 word tweet on how to bring down the Washington Monument. What? That seems grossly irresponsible, if not potentially criminal. I don't understand it. I don't understand what's it supposed to accomplish, other than pissing everyone off. Is this are we really about to do the brown shirts versus red shirts things? Is that where I'm going? Am I? Is this really where I'm going? The brown shirts versus red shirts thing? If so, I'm in totally the wrong city. I'm gonna have to move rapidly. Anyways, I guess that's all. So I'll just finish the stream where I ended. That it looks to me like this authority for the president gives him the authority to use troops to quiet the insurrections that are happening. So I think the president can probably deploy troops, deploy the National Guard. He can deploy the National Guard because that would be the militia. So he can deploy the National Guard. He can deploy the armed forces if he needs to help insurrections. So I think he has authority under 10 USC 253. Do you think any of these protests see justice given all the video evidence? I don't even know what that means. I think that whatever cause that they are trying to promote has become swamped out by the bad actors, which is incidentally why policing your own side for bad actors is a good idea because it makes your own side look bad. So your own movement should try to police your own side for bad actors because they make you look bad. So I think it's a bad thing. Grand jury declined to indict the three sheriff officers. Yeah, you might have to come back at it. I don't know if they're necessarily out of the woods yet, but okay. Anyways, I'm going to sign off for now. I hope you enjoyed the stream. I hope you enjoyed this as always. As always, if you've already done so, if you'd be so kind as to give the stream a like, I'd super appreciate it. As always, I appreciate your support. I appreciate the people who super chatted very much. You are helping me try to live my hat dreams. Thank you very much. With your super chats, hats may be possible, and better cameras may be possible, better mics may be possible, and Indochino may be possible. So with your super chats, all these things may become a new reality. So it is super appreciated as always. I very much value your support as always. I'm very grateful to have you here. Very grateful for the commentary and the questions. Hopefully this thing will be over sooner rather than later. I'm getting a little bit tired of all this. Thank you for the $2 super chat from Mickey Mishra. I really appreciate it. Until later, my friends. Peace. Good night.